Hello students, continuing with your module 3 but a new chapter, that is your memory management. So when I am telling memory management, when I say memory, it is very specifically I am talking about your main memory. Now why is that main memory should be managed? As we have discussed earlier many a times, main memory is one of the important resources and it is also limited. For any program to be executed, it must be brought into the main memory. So it is very important for the effective management of main memory for the better performance of the system. So now let us see how main memory is managed. What are the algorithms that is there? What are the various addresses? What are the address bindings that is available? How a process or how a memory location is identified? How do we actually try to fit a process into the memory? What happens when it is not fitting it right? All that is what we will be addressing in this particular chapter. Now let us understand a little more about the main memory before we get into the concepts. Now, as said earlier, if a program needs to be executed, now for example, if I say you have a program that is program.c. Now this program.c is sitting in one of your hard disk. Now if I want to run this program.c, from the hard disk it is loaded to the main memory and then the instructions must be fetched from the memory so that it can be executed. Now talking about the execution, with the main memory we also have the CPU and the registers that is involved in the execution. When I talk about the number of CPU cycles that is taken by the register and the main memory is a little different. The registers, if you remember to the memory hierarchy that we discussed, so registers is one of the fastest memory unit that we have. So we require just one CPU cycle to access the content of a register, whereas it is not the same with your main memory. So to access the content in your main memory, it may take many cycles and it may also cause stall. Now what is a stall? The CPU is waiting for the data that needs to be executed, but the data has still not arrived. Just to simplify you, what does it mean? Let me just give you an example of if you had seen that video and audio not syncing in a live stream. Now with the fastest internet connections, I think it is a very rare case to see, but it sometimes happens. The audio would have arrived, but the video of that audio has still not arrived. So what do it generally happens? It is going to buffer in the local memory and only then it would be giving it to the user. Similarly, to match up the speed of the CPU and the main memory, we have another faster memory that sits between the main memory and the register, that is the cache. Now, the CPU can directly access the register, the main memory and the cache memory. Having said that, Each process has a separate memory space. Probably when we had addressed in the introduction of your process, we have seen that every process is allocated a separate memory space in the main memory. Now, there is a separate space that is allocated, but how do I ensure no other process access that space? How do I ensure that that memory is protected? So the protection is ensured by the hardware implementation. So what is the hardware support that we have? We have it with a pair of two registers, that is the base register and the limit register. So the base register holds the smallest legal physical memory address, and the limit register specifies the range of the size. Now let me show it to you with an example. Now you can see here, this is the memory structure. So in the main memory we have the operating system that is running, and after that the remaining part of the memory shall be used by different processes. Now what am I talking about is, you can see there are three processes that is named, and there is some free space that is available here. Now I have allocated, let me say process 1, 2, 3. Now process 1 is allocated from 256,000 to 3,000,040. Now what is the protection that we are talking about is, this process should not exceed its usage. So any operations that it does, it must do within this itself. If it is exceeding, probably it will be treated as an illegal operation or an error. So we told about that is the protection is taken by the hardware, that is by using the base register and the limit register. Now the base register has the smallest or the legal location from where it is starting. I say this particular process is starting at 3,000,040 and is ranging up to 120900. So this is the range. So when I add my base to the limit, I will be arriving with the maximum limit the process can use. That is, the process can use only from this to this. This is the range in which the process can be acting, and this is the range that shall be treated legal. So to represent the same in the hardware, you can see here. So every time a CPU is generating the address, it is checked if it is greater than the base address, but it should be less than the base plus the limit. So you can see here, so every operation that is coming should be greater than this or equal to this. It can take 300041, 42, 43, or it can start from 40. If it is less than that, it is probably interfering to another process. And again, base plus limit will give you your maximum range. So here you can see, if it should be less than the base plus the limit. So if it is exceeding the base plus the limit, again if it is making an access to 420,941, it is again illegal. It is making an access of another process. So if it is missing this range, then it would be treated as an addressing error. If it is within the range, it shall be mapped to that particular memory. So this will ensure Now, who handles this base and the limit register? This base and the limit register can be handled only by the operating system. So the operating system uses special privilege instructions that shall be run in the kernel mode. So it is the operating system that will be using the base and the limit register to generate the logical address. Now let us see the address binding. Now what do I mean by the address binding? As a user, you would have seen to the symbolic address or the name of that file. Now let me say it is a program.c or a bubblesort.c. You are only looking to the symbolic address, but each of these symbolic address is actually bound to a physical address or a memory location. Now, what are the different stages that this address takes is what we will be seeing in your address binding. So, the source code that is written will be represented as a symbolic address by the user that will be binded to a relocatable address during the compilation, and that relocatable address to the absolute physical address by the linker or the loader. Let us address to each of that. Now, as said, there are three stages: compile time, load time, and the execution time. Probably if I have to talk about your simple C program, so your .c file is converted to .obj, and then .obj file is converted to .exe. So similarly, we have three different address bindings that is happening. So in the compile time, if it is known at the compile time where the program will reside in the physical memory, then the absolute code can be generated by the compiler, which contains the actual physical address. However, if the load address changes at some time later, then the program needs to be recompiled. Whereas in case of a loader or the load time, if the location at which the program is loaded is not known at the compile time, then the compiler must generate a relocatable code which references the address relative to the start of the program. If that starting address changes, then the program must be reloaded, not recompiled. And in case of your execution time, if a program can be moved around the memory during the course of execution, then probably the binding must be delayed until the execution time. Here it is talking about the basically address mapping is a mapping of one address space to another address space. Probably this will have a further clarity when we look into a next topic of your logical address and physical address. Now, talking about your logical address and physical address. Well, firstly, what is a logical address? It is an address that is generated by the CPU. Now, what is the physical address? It is the actual address where your program resides, or it is the address that is seen by your memory unit or the main memory. Now, what is the logical address space and what is the physical address space? Set of all logical addresses that is used by a program is your logical address space, and corresponding to the logical address space, a set of physical addresses composed will be your physical address space. Now we said that Address binding is a mapping of one address space to another address space. Now we'll see that here. So the logical and physical addresses are same in case of your compile time and load time binding, whereas the logical and the physical address differs during your execution time binding. Now what is that is now the mapping of this one address space to another, that is the mapping of the logical address space to the physical address space, is handled by a hardware device, that is your memory management unit. Now probably in your first years you would have seen it as one of the units that is a part of your system. Now what is the role of this unit is what we will be addressing here. So it is basically used to convert the virtual address or logical address to the physical address. It does it with your relocation register. And what is relocation register? Probably initially we started the discussion with base register. The base register here is termed as your relocation register. So the value of the relocation register is added, you can see here. So this is my logical address that is generated by the CPU. So with the help of the relocation register, I will be generating the physical address, that is the address on the memory unit. Now if I say 0002 1500 is the memory addresses that is there. So the main memory, if I say a particular file in the main memory is in the location 14346. So this is the address the main memory can understand, or this is the address the main memory will refer to. But what is the address the CPU generates? It would be 346. This address added with the relocation register derives as the actual location of that program or the actual physical address. The next thing that we have is about your dynamic loading. Now what is dynamic loading? Previously we have seen what is the role of load and load time, where it is going to load the program into the memory. Now what do I mean by dynamic loading? Dynamic loading is one concept that is used for better utilization of the memory. Now how am I making a better utilization? A routine that is not called shall never be loaded into the memory. Now how is that going to happen, or how is that helpful? Now let me say you have written a program. You have written a switch program. Fine. And you have written 10 cases for the switch program. And every case you're calling a function or a routine. Now if I have to say some arithmetic operation, case 1 addition, it will call a function or a routine for addition. Eventually there are 10 cases. Now what happens if it is not a dynamic loading? Now I will be loading this program of yours, and I will also be loading all the 10 routines that is associated with this program. Now what happens? I am unnecessarily wasting the memory there. Now what if a user comes and he is only going to run one of the cases. Out of the 10 routine, if only one of the routine is used, then why should I load all the 10 routines into the main memory? So to avoid that is where we use dynamic loading. So a routine will be loaded only if it is called. Now if the user is going to run case 1, then only the first routine is called. If the user is running case 2, then the second routine is loaded. So accordingly only that is called shall be loaded. Now what are the advantages of doing this? It is very evident that the memory is not wasted, and if we sometimes have a very large code but what will be executed is very small, we are unnecessarily dumping those code into the main memory and wasting it. The other major advantage is it does not require any special support from the operating system. So this would be helping us to save the main memory. The next thing that we have is about your dynamic linking. Now what is about dynamic linking? Program will have a set of libraries that would have been, it will be linking to. Now for example, if I say stdio.h or if I say hash include stdio.h, so that library shall be linked to your code. Now what happens in static linking? A library module gets fully included in a executable modules. This is wasting the disk space as well as the main memory space, because every program is going to own a copy of that routine it is linked to. So what do we do in case of your dynamic linking? We postpone the linking until execution. So rather than having the whole library into the code, we will just have a small piece of code that is called as stub. Now what is this stub? Once the program encounters the usage of some library, so it will see what is that we told in static linking. Now if I say, now when do I use my stdio.h? When I am using some printf. So when it is encountering the printf, the control eventually goes to your stdio.h and it is linking there and it is all going to run. Now rather than, now I would have been use math.h, and similarly now including the whole stdio.h to your program, including the complete math.h to your program, we include a small reference of that particular code to the program. That is, the library is stored in one single location in the memory, and a reference to that location, a small piece of code is written which will actually locate that library routine in the memory. That is your stub. Now if I have to give you another example that you have just come across, or that you have just used it day in and day out, probably when you have an application, you create a shortcut of that application on your desktop. That application is actually in the C drive in your program file, but you would have created a reference on the desktop. The application size would be in GB, but when I say this reference or that shortcut that you have created, it is a small, it is just of some KBs. It should have just been a 25 KB or a 30 KB. So when you double click on the shortcut, that will actually take you to the actual application. That is the same thing the stub is going to do. Rather than including the library everything into the executable code, we include the stub. So whenever there is a requirement of that routine or the library, we would run the stub that was actually going to locate the library or the routine. So this method eventually saves the memory for us as well. So these are again some of the methods that is going to help us save your main memory. The next concept that we have is about your swapping. Now what is swapping? Probably you had come across it previously when we were talking about a process. The term used there was context switching. So what was context switching? Now I have a process. A process is running on the CPU. Now if there is another process, we have seen to all that preemptive, non-preemptive, priority, round robin and all of it. Now due to one of the scheduling algorithms, if there comes another process, then we will actually context switch this process from the CPU. If I say process P1 is running, we swap out and we swap in the other process, that is P2. The same thing can happen with your memory as well. Context switching was the concept that was used on your CPU. Swapping is a concept that is used on your memory. Now, for example, if we have main memory is limited, it can accommodate only few processes in the main memory. Now, if there is a process that is idle, or if there is a process that has not got a chance to execute on the CPU, and if there is another process that is ready to be executed, so what we do is we swap out this process from the memory and we swap in the new process into the memory. Now when I say I am swapping out, where do I swap out? From main memory, I will be swapping it out to a backing store that is similar, or that is nothing but your hard disk. So I swap out to the hard disk and I swap in another process that is ready to be brought to the main memory. So you can see here, now I had process P1 that was resident in the main memory. Now if I assume that process P1 was idle and not given to the CPU, and it is there in the main memory for a very long time and has not completed its execution. Now what I do is, and if I say there is another process P2 that is ready to be executed and it is waiting. So having said process P1 is idle from a very long time, I swap out this process and I will be swapping in the process P2. The other small variation we have to this swapping process is rollout and roll in, where the swapping is done based on the priority. So if there is a higher priority process that is waiting to be loaded, then we swap out the lower priority process, and here we call the action to be roll out and roll in. Now when I say I am swapping out a process, Earlier to this class, we saw a memory structure. We saw something called as a base register, limit register, a range of memory location. Now let me tell process P1 was at the memory location. Let me tell the range was from 100 to 150. Fine. I am talking about the address range. I am telling it is at the address range 100, or let me say 1000, and 1000 to 1500 is the address range. Now I have swapped out process P1. Sometime in near future I have to again swap back this process P1, and process P1 at some point of the time has to complete its execution. Now will I be swapping process P1 to the same address location that it had left before, or am I going to swap into a different address location? This purely depends on your address binding. If the address binding is done at the load time, we have already discussed during your address binding, if the binding is done at the load time, now if it is done at the load time, then probably it should be moved back to the same location. It cannot be moved to a different location. That is, if process P1 was at the address location 1000 to 1500, it has to swap in back to 1000 to 1500 if the address binding is done at the load time itself. If the address binding is postponed until the execution time, probably it could move to or it could be swapped in to a different location. Now I have already clarified you what is a context switch and what is swapping. So context switch is happening on the CPU, swapping is happening on the memory. Now let us see an example. If swapping is included, then this context switch time could be extremely high. Now let us say it is a round robin scheduling that is happening. Process P1, P2, P3. Process P1 and P2 is in memory. Process P1 is given to the CPU. Process P1 completed its execution. Now it will switch to process P2. Now process P2 goes on to the memory. Process P2 completed the time quantum, completed its execution. Now next the CPU will switch to process P3. Now process P3 is not in the memory. Now what happens? I will have to swap out one of the process. Let me say I consider to swap out process P1 and I will swap in process P3. Now you can take it here. For example, if a process is of size 100 MB and the hard disk is transferring at the rate of 50 Mbps. Now if that is the case, to swap out a single process, it is going to take 200 milliseconds. And of the same size, if I have to again swap in another process, it is taking 400 milliseconds. Now your context switch time is coming to 4 seconds. Now again, there could be an added overhead if we take the transfer and the rotational latency. Now let us see what are the other things that can be a part of your swap time. Now the swap time is directly proportional to the amount of memory swapped. Now I said I have the main memory and I am swapping that data from the main memory to the hard disk, and again I am taking another process from the hard disk and putting it to the main memory. When I say hard disk, apart from the transfer rate, there could be the head seek and rotational latency. Now what is this head seek? It is the time taken for the read-write head to be positioned on the data. That is, I move the read-write head either front or back. That could take some milliseconds of time definitely. Now what is the rotational latency? It is the time taken for the hard disk to rotate and position the data under the read-write heads. For it to rotate, it is again going to take few milliseconds. Now again taking another example, if we have a user process of 10 MB and the backing store is our hard disk with a speed of 40 Mbps. Now to transfer this 10 MB, I am taking 1/4 of a second, that is 250 milliseconds. Here we have assumed that there is no head seek. That is, I am not taking any time to move the read-write heads. If that is also considered, it will eventually increase the time. And if I assume there is 8 milliseconds of latency, so the swap time is 258 milliseconds. That is one swap out operation. Again, to swap in, I will take the same time, which will come up to 516 milliseconds. So by these examples, what are we trying to convey or what are we trying to prove here is the swapping or the context switch time is very high. So it gives a provision to swap out and swap in a process. Now with all these disadvantages, do we require this feature? Sometimes certainly yes. As I started my discussion of swapping, we said that if a process is idle, doing nothing and unnecessarily occupying the main memory, then certainly we will have to swap out. But in situations like this, so we have to be very careful considering the time that it is taking to swap in and swap out. The other constraint that we have to take here is we have to swap out a process only if it is completely idle. So we should never swap out a process that is in a pending IO or that may be nearly called again in the near future by the CPU. The previous example I was talking about a round robin. Now process P1 was swapped out. In a near future again process P1 is called back. Again 4 seconds is again wasted. So we should make sure when we are swapping out a process, we swap out a process that is completely idle. Now let's see about your contiguous memory allocation. So the main memory will accommodate both the operating system and the user process. If you remember, we started the chapter with the representation of your main memory. You could see there was one part of the main memory which was occupied by the operating system. So the memory is divided into two partitions, wherein one partition we have the operating system that is residing, and in the other partition we have the user processes. and each process is contained as a single contiguous section. Now, what do I mean by single contiguous section? If I say a process P1, it has a location that is ranging from 300,202 to 30050. That is, it is a continuous allocation for that range. I cannot be having a process from 30020 to 30030 and again the same process in 40020, something like that. It will be continuously occupying at a single stretch. We have seen it earlier also, and we know that protection is very important. Now, what do I mean by memory protection? I should be protecting my operating system from the user process. If a user process accidentally or deliberately makes any mistake that can be affecting my OS, or if it is trying to enter to the region or the partition of the operating system, or also I need to be protecting one user process from another process. Now, how is that done? That is done with the help of your relocation register or your limit register. Now, the relocation register contains the value or the smallest physical address, and the limit register contains the range of the logical address. So, what happens here? Each logical address must be less than the limit register, and then the memory management unit, that is your MMU, maps this logical address dynamically by adding the value of the relocation register. This mapped address is sent to the memory. So, when the CPU scheduler selects a process for execution, the dispatcher loads the relocation and the limit register with the correct values, because every address generated by CPU is checked against these registers. We can by this protect the OS from the running process and also each process from a